Welcome back to A Moment in History. I'm Seth Udinsky. In this moment in history, let's go back to a pivotal period in Western civilization. Historians often label this period as the one that drove the world into the modern era, where society was transformed. It was a time of groundbreaking inventions, powerful business tycoons, and a dramatic shift from agriculture to industry. Now, it was also a time in world history where nations began to flex their muscles in political power all at the same time, and it resulted in driving the world towards war. Let's explore the time in history known as the Gilded Age. The Gilded Age gets its name from famous American author Mark Twain. Like all periods in history, there's no exact time parameters for this period, but many historians believe that it began in the 1860s and lasted until the start of World War I in 1914. And that's important. We'll see why in just a moment. Now, in America, the end of the Civil War is seen as the moment in which this age of industry truly began. Before the Civil War, society in America was still largely agrarian, though it had been gradually moving towards engineering and technology since the start of the Industrial Revolution in the early 19th century. But in the late 19th century, the focus shifted to the city and factories. Natural materials such as electricity and gas-powered machinery began to drive the engines of society. This was happening throughout the Western world as well, not just in America. Now let's take a look for just a moment at some of the great inventions of the age from this time period. Thomas Edison perfected the light bulb in the late 1870s, which revolutionized the simple need for light at night. He also invented the phonograph in the same decade, which revolutionized audio. The telephone was invented earlier that decade by Scotsman Alexander Graham Bell, which enabled instant worldwide communication and would become the preeminent method of communication only a century later. In travel, the automobile was invented at the turn of the century, and Henry Ford perfected it with his Model T in 1908. The Wright brothers similarly took to the skies, perfecting their first airplane in 1903. Now, as we said earlier, the Gilded Age was also an age of nationalism. In the United States and throughout Europe, a spirit of national pride and patriotism overtook the nations, and something of an arms race commenced in Europe. Historians believe that this convergence of arms building, as well as a convoluted connection of alliances between powers, was ultimately what led to the outbreak of World War I in 1914, when Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria was murdered by Bosnian revolutionaries. Thanks so much for joining me once again for A Moment in History.